Howard Lutnick is your Secretary of Commerce, and if you believe all the reports coming out of the White House, he is the guy leading the charge for Donald Trump on tariffs. He seems to love the idea of tariffs. And of course, we're talking about tariffs for multiple reasons, right? Retaliatory threats against our other government partners around the world who are levying tariffs against us. And if they don't trade fair, then damn it, we're going to raise tariffs on you. And like when it came to Mexico and Canada, when we wanted them to increase border security, the threat of a tariff seemed to work, at least temporarily. Let's see how that plays out. When you've got governments like France who are charging us extra tariffs on stuff, and we say, all right, we're going to charge you for a tariff, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to drop their tariffs, or we're going to raise tariffs on their goods, and more people will probably buy American-made products like wine and cheese. We have good wine in California, so screw France. That's the kind of thing that tariffs have been used for in the past and what Trump has threatened to use them for this time around. But then there's Lutnick, along with Trump, who says, hold on, there's a bigger vision here. You know, we used to fund our government through two major things, tariffs and land sales. You know, the federal government owns huge amounts of land west of the Mississippi. They run it all, they own it all, they manage it all. They could sell off those pieces of property and make quite a bit of money with it. We could fund the government with those kinds of things. They're not really talking about land sales right now, but they should. But tariffs, they think tariffs could actually fund the government in such a way that they could reduce taxes, eliminate full tax brackets, and eventually get rid of the income tax. Now, I don't think it's ever going to reach that point, but there's real conversations about that right now, about making tariffs a major funding component for the federal government. And that'll do one of two things. It'll release the tax burden, income tax burden on individuals, and it will entice manufacturers to rebuild a manufacturing base here in America. That means they'll avoid tariffs by manufacturing here in this country, and they'll hire Americans not only to work in those manufacturing factories, but also to support those factories with parts, with services, with restaurants and parking lots. And that's how you build a domestic economy, no longer reliant on cheap goods coming from countries like China that cheat on monetary policies and trade policies, but also immorally employ people utilizing slave labor tactics. Okay, all of that makes sense, except you should expect some lag time here, right? We can't build a manufacturing base in this country again just like that. It's been 70 years in the making as we've deteriorated our manufacturing base. So in the meantime, what do we do? With goods costing more, scarcity of product, I mean, it might be an economic speed bump, let's say, as this new vision remaking the American manufacturing economy happens. So enter Howard Lutnick. He's the Commerce Secretary, and he's the person who is sort of articulating the vision of what the Trump administration sees in the future when we remake this economy based on the way I just described it. And, well, Lutnick's pretty good at this. Let's see what he has to say.
But it sounds like you're saying, trust us. And are you worried that at some point, Americans are going to feel like there's a bunch of billionaires in Washington who are playing Russian roulette with our retirement?
$2 trillion deficits don't bother you at all. How could you ask me, while we're running a $2 trillion deficit, and not care? You're destroying the people who have run this country before, are destroying the future for my children and my children's children. I can't have a 50, 75, we have a $36 trillion deficit. And we used to run deficits of 400 billion. Now 2 trillion, everybody's like, who cares? I tell you what, who cares? Donald Trump cares. And when we balance the budget, you know what that means? That means our deficits stop. Interest rates come smashing down. His goal is to have external revenue. You know, the way I think about it, we all are so used to paying taxes. We're so used to it. We have like Stockholm syndrome. You know, don't stop the Internal Revenue Service, God forbid. How about this? The rest of the world leans on our economy, breathes off our economy. Not only is our economy $29 trillion GDP, but we consume $20 trillion a year. We are the buyer of everybody's stuff. We buy everybody's stuff. So who's more important? The people who sell stuff or the people who buy stuff? So we are the buyer of everybody's commodities, products, goods and services. Everything comes from us, right? Let them pay a membership fee. We all understand that model. Let them pay. How about we, you and I, and every single person we know pay less? How about no tax on tips? How about no tax on overtime? How about no Social Security? How about all those things? These are the kind of thoughts that will change America. I know what his goal is. No tax for anybody who makes less than $150,000 a year. That's his goal.
So
And that's what I'm working for.
Okay, so that's the first time we've heard this articulated from the Trump administration. No income tax on anybody making less than 150,000. That's a very large percentage of the working people of America, and that's Howard Lutnick articulating that. And if I heard him right, he just basically described his vision for America, the #1 consumer of product in the world, as kind of a giant Sam's Club. Let's call it Trump's Club, right? You want in here, France, you want in here, China, to sell your product. You want to get into this market, Canada, so you can sell your maple syrup to us. All you people in Germany selling your really, really, really bad music in our market. You want in here, you have to pay a membership fee. It's called a tariff. Come on in. You pay it, and then you can sell to all these great American consumers who are dying to buy your stuff. Yes, even you, Brazil, with your thong bathing suits, we'll let you in. You just need to pay the membership fee. So that makes sense the way he tells it, doesn't it? All right. But none of that will work unless this guy has a really, really good economic track record because of the implementation of his policies. You see, if he has to weather the storm with a big old recession or higher inflation, it's going to make it harder to sell all his other stuff. And just to put this in context, when Ronald Reagan came in 1981 to revolutionize our economy and federal government spending and taxes after the nightmare of Jimmy Carter, he had to weather a 2-year recession to get it done. But people stayed the course, people had faith, and he did, in fact, get it done. And it was called Reaganomics, and it gave us the largest growing economy that our country has seen in modern history. So now how's this guy doing? So far, insanely good, actually. Based on the recent reports that we just got this week, wholesale inflation is on the decline. Consumer inflation on the decline. Gas prices are on the decline. Have you noticed that when you go to fill up? Have you noticed how much cheaper gas is in just like 4 or 5 weeks? Mortgage rates are easing off. Egg prices finally dropping to before Trump was president, right before they started the chicken genocide at the hands of Joe Adolf Biden. Private sector is expanding and the government is shrinking. In fact, over on CNBC, when the inflation numbers came out, I mean, it was like late night Cinemax softcore pornography. Take a look.
On a headline, expecting up 0.3, up 0, goose egg, unched. Boy, that is progress. We haven't had a number that low. Well, we equaled it in July of last year when we had another 0. To find a lower number, you're back to October of 23 at -0.4. Strip out the all-important food and 10, down 0.1. That's 0.4 lower than expectations. Down 0.1 also equals July of last year. Find a lower number, you're going back to COVID times, April of 2020. On a headline.
All right, now that's CNBC, and they're a little bit more right of center than other networks. So let's turn over to CNN and see how they're dastardly spinning these numbers. I'm sure they're trying to make it look like bad news, right?
Finally, we have some good news on the economy and really the #1 issue for many Americans, the cost of living. So we just learned that consumer prices in February increased by 2.8% year over year, 0.2% month over month. Both of these figures were a step in the right direction, and both were better than expected. So this is definitely very encouraging to see, because it's going to, I think, really fears that inflation was perhaps re-accelerating, because this actually breaks a streak of 4 straight months where I think you could see it on the chart all the way to the right, where the inflation rate was going in the wrong direction, right? It was going higher and higher. Finally, we're seeing it dip.
By the way, let me just take one last look at that graph. In case anybody didn't notice, that giant mountain in the middle of the graph, that would be the Biden presidency. Now, to be fair, because this is misreported a lot, and we don't want to fall into the same trap that people in the mainstream media fall into, inflation is not down. And inflation did not go down. It rose, but at a much smaller rate than it has. So every single point on this line graph you're looking at is an above 0 percentage point of the consumer price index. That's what we use to determine inflation. And yes, it was up 2.1%, which is down, way down from the middle of the Biden presidency and down from the month before. It was not expected. And it is a move in the right direction because you don't want prices to continue to go up and be up. So that's a good thing. Very, very strong economic news for Donald Trump at the very beginning. Let me give you a quick look here. This is specifically the inflation index. That red line right there, or the red arrow, that's the day Donald Trump was inaugurated as president of the United States. Okay, this is the Truflation U.S. Inflation Index. This is different than the CPI that you get from the government. Truflation, they say, takes into account more goods and services that are like everyday purchases for the American people. It's a little different than the outdated CPI. Look at the last 6 months here and look at where the Truflation numbers were leading right up to Donald Trump becoming president, and look at that precipitous drop. That's remarkable. And that is a fundamentally sound and strong indication for the Trump economy really starting to take off. Add to that this latest unemployment number, or employment number, I should say. Yes, the number was kind of right in the wheelhouse of what people were expecting, but what they weren't expecting is where those jobs were coming from. For the first time in years, a huge number of the job growth in America were domestic manufacturing jobs. Almost all of the job growth we had under Joe Biden were government jobs. Not anymore. Now we're actually making things, and we're doing things. And we're hiring Americans to make and do those things. Listen, it's very early on. But if those economic indicators continue and we have a strong, growing economy, and Trump can get his budget passed with new tax cuts, well, then he can actually implement these robust new changes, radical changes to the way we go about business in the federal government, swinging things over into a more tariff-heavy funding of the government's necessities. That would then immediately end up with you having lower income taxes. And, well, I can't tell you what that'll look like because we haven't seen anything like that, ever. It's new territory. And I am wondering if you know that higher tariffs mean that if you buy something from overseas, it'll cost more money than the cheap stuff that you get right now from China, which is frankly immorally and erroneously undervalued because of their use of slave labor and their communist designs on taking over the world economy. So right now they undermine our monetary value, our dollar value, with their monetary practices. But that said, if we raise tariffs around the world and you have to spend more money for things that you purchase overseas, but you won't spend as much if you buy them manufactured here domestically, and you'll know that by buying domestically, you're actually encouraging more Americans to get good paying jobs right here at home, making things and doing things instead of just, driving Uber on their side gig. Would you be okay with that? Especially if the net result of that extra money you're spending to buy things means that the government is funded instead of you having to pay income taxes. Are you happy with that trade-off? Can you even imagine what that might look like? Let us know in the comments. I'm curious as to whether you're on board with it. Because Trump is rolling the dice. He's got Lutnick out there as the spokesperson for it, and he sure seems all in on this. Are you, though? Are you?